We all have our stories why 2020 is a lot. It's a tsunami wave of a lot. When I look back at my plans or my intentions from 2020, the week before 2020, I actually was able to enact a lot of that because it was a lot of online stuff. And anything related to character growth or anything related to personal growth required a massive, quick shift into a growth curve. Either that or just sink, one or the other. And I don't know about you, but we've had our own personal crises, and I continue to hear beyond COVID, beyond the election, beyond Black Lives Matter, beyond and beyond all the big collective communal things that everybody has been addressing or engaging or being overwhelmed by or just had to grapple with. We also have our own crises. Maybe not everybody's talking about them publicly, but I know for myself, I know for my friends, I have heard all sorts of stories about things that are happening in people's families or their work or obviously health issues. This is just a year of a lot. No one's going to forget this year. It's been intense. So I wrote a book, Homeschool Mama Self-Care, Nurturing the Nurturer. But I didn't write it in the midst of this season. I wrote it about a year and a half ago. And I frankly thought, I got to put this on the back burner because this doesn't apply to what's going on. I was thinking that back in March. And I remember someone telling me, it totally applies to right now. Self-care, taking care of ourselves, nurturing ourselves as homeschool mamas. Does it apply now? Well, of course it applies now. But here's the problem. I can't give content. I'm not that person that can give content or share things with you that I don't know or that I don't personally use or I don't know how to grapple with. There are times where I write things in a book or I write things on a post that I later discover and realize I wrote that. I should do that more. But it isn't an I should do that ever because I do use all the things that I write. I know that stuff intimately. I have had much opportunity to put a lot of it into practice. But this kind of crisis, no one's experienced. Not like this. There's all sorts of crises across the world, and I know that our culture is very blessed to not have all sorts of crises that many people have experienced in our lifetime, but not in our backyards. But now, as a whole, we're all dealing with this very, very large crisis. What do we do when the stress gets intense? When the anxiety of all of it feels crazy heavy? Do we want to either collapse onto the sofa? Do we just keep going? Do we get just completely exhausted? Do we have self-care strategies or do we have some sort of strategies to address this level of stress? So it's challenging for me to address all of this because you know and I know I haven't lived through this. I haven't had this level of challenge. I have had some challenges that if you know me, you know that I have had some real life challenging starts or a challenging start to my life. I have been in Africa a couple times and that was by choice. And the one time was into East Africa during the Ebola crisis. And I was a homeschool mom, brought my kids there too, don't ask. But anyways, that is a story. And it was a similar energy to all this, except probably more intense. It was only 3 weeks though, but more intense because the anticipation of the hospital that my husband was working in actually being exposed to Ebola. It was more real life, an actual possibility, and we didn't know that until we were actually there. We understood it wasn't likely before we left, but when we got there, we found out that it was a likely possibility. So I have lived under this feeling of isolation or quarantine for a few weeks, but that was just a few weeks. And you remember in the beginning of March, the middle of March, when everybody said it's just a few weeks? I remember listening to some homeschool podcasts that I love listening to, and they had like podcast quarantine week number 1, quarantine week number 2, and I forget what happened by the quarantine week number 6, but I think they changed the title, and we're now going to accept that this is a new normal. Hopefully not quarantine all the time, but some massive shift in how we relate and how we engage our health issues as a community or something. I'll probably be able to add a few more words to that in about 20 years. And that's my point, that I'm going through this right now, just like you are. We're all going through this. And so what are the self-care strategies? What are the things that we can do to help us get through this? So instead of throwing strategies at you that I'm hoping are going to work, I'm going to tell you strategies that I'm actually doing for me right now. In no particular order. But the biggest one, and it started somewhere by the middle of April of this year, and it was that I needed to accept what is. When we fight it, we make it harder. Clearly, this is not going away anytime soon, so we have to accept what is and acknowledge what's going on inside of us at any given time, how we're feeling about that thing. All of this in context of our homeschool, because though we have had an advantage as homeschoolers to bring our kids home during that isolation time, you might be in isolation right now, we knew how to be together most of the time. We knew how to create an educational atmosphere. We knew how to occupy ourselves at home. We had all the framework for how to be in our homeschool. Hopefully, we also had a framework of how to acknowledge our feelings and accept our feelings and engage our feelings. And if we didn't, we get to now. And we also have to be able to acknowledge those feelings in front of our kids. And I think it's useful, depending on what the crisis is, because some of these crises, we really are better not sharing all the details with our kids. But to some extent, we need to acknowledge how we're feeling, how we're dealing with our stresses, and we need to ask them about how they're feeling too. So lucky for us, we have a lot of time with our kids, and we can fit that in somehow, some way. We don't have to inappropriately share details, possibly making them feel more anxious or uncomfortable. We can ask them specifically, how can we support you? How can I support you? How can I make you feel able to carry the challenge of all of this? One thing we do as homeschool parents that we don't know that we do is that we subconsciously share how we're engaging things, whether we put it into words and say, this is what I'm doing, this is how I'm dealing with my feelings. Even though you can put those out there, and it does help to put it into words, our kids, as they say, can catch more than they're taught, because more of what we do is caught than taught. So they subconsciously know how we're engaging anyway. So we definitely want to accept that they see it and acknowledge how we feel it. Homeschool kids know a lot about their homeschool parents. Make memories. There's something that you might be surprised for me to say, but even as crazy or really surprising as this year has been, we can create memories out of this time. Accept that life is going to throw you a few curveballs and then decide to play ball on the fly. So what can you do to create memories, to make your day, make this time seem special or unusual for your kids? It can be bittersweet, or it can just be better. We can create new family traditions in whatever way they are. Something that I'm doing more regularly as we're spending more time with each other as a family and a little bit less time gradually with external, with other people in the community, as we're going into this second wave again in where I am right now in British Columbia, is to intentionally create Netflix time with each of my kids. And you should know that I'm not somebody that spends a lot of time watching anything. I'm more that mom that has a little bit of dark chocolate and watches Netflix until I fall asleep in 15 minutes. I'm that homeschool mom. So I would like to be a binger of Netflix, but I'm not. And so for me, it's an intentional thing, it's an unusual thing, and it definitely is creating memories. So I've got one kiddo that gladly will watch Christmas movies with me. Middle of November. I've never done this before. Started watching Christmas movies in November. I've always said after my birthday, which is the last day of November, that's when Christmas starts. But this year I'm like, fine, let's go. Let's do this Christmas thing. And Christmas movies with her. I've started watching a certain series with my husband that my oldest daughter really loves, who happens to be across the country. And I don't get to spend time with her for Christmas. So in spirit, we're watching the same TV series. And, just creating those special memories, and it doesn't have to be Netflix, it can be literally anything, but creating special memories that are built around this year. One thing that we have to accept is that our emotions are doing a roller coaster thing. We can feel great, like we had an experience over the summer that we weren't in a lockdown. There were numbers increasing, but they weren't increasing dramatically. So we're at home. We get to do similar kind of normal things, although outdoors, and we get to do fire pits, we get to go to the beach, we get to visit people even if we're socially distanced, but we're still visiting people. We get to do all those sorts of normal things. And so then it felt kind of normal. Everything felt sort of just the way it always was, but a little bit more outdoors than we'd already been, which we do a lot. And yet now we're starting to recognize the numbers in our area are significantly going up, and in our general region, and there's an anticipation of what's going to happen next. And so we can expect that not only is the uncertainty growing around us, but there's also our emotions that kind of go on a weird roller coaster up and down and all over the place. And our emotions are going to interrupt our day. If you're like me and you have a plan for your day, you've got things to do, and you hope the kids are engaged fully, and you're doing stuff and you want to do the plan, then emotions that interrupt, they're not part of the day. But we need to accept that our emotions are a part of the day. And so when we have those emotions, what do we do with them? With the uncomfortable, challenging feelings that we have about whatever's going on. Sit with it. Sit with the feeling. Recognize that just as the clouds pass in the sky, so do those feelings. We can learn a lot from those feelings. When once I thought those intense feelings would overwhelm, because I was close to feeling like it was overwhelming at my late teenage years, I've learned, no, feelings are just like clouds in the sky. They can feel really intense. They can definitely look like a really wickedly nasty storm coming in. And then eventually they pass. And sometimes they're those big, billowy white stratus clouds, I think, that are just beautiful in the blue sky, and they're just summery and cheery, and we have those days and those, or maybe those moments, or maybe those hours, and they'll pass too. But the uncomfortable ones are the ones that we're most concerned about, not the big, puffy, beautiful ones. The uncomfortable ones will pass, so sit with it. Try to understand, what is the feeling? Why are you feeling what you're feeling? What's the underlying need that you have under those feelings? Spend time with them. Get comfortable with them. Explore your emotional landscape. Come to understand yourself a little bit more because of this year. Get outside help. No question. There's not enough people saying this. Probably there's not enough people that are able to do this, because there's so many people trying to do this now. But get outside help, which I mean, if you need to do it online, you can do that. If you can do it in real time, that's great too. But therapy. If you need someone to talk with, to talk through something with, and you don't have that, or you want someone's objective experience or opinion on something, then find someone. You can find someone online to engage those things. So get outside help. Build your community of helpers. Expect that you won't always know what to do in any given scenario. And that I don't like. I don't like not knowing what the best thing is to do. I don't like knowing what the next thing is going to happen. I want to be able to plan. I want to be proactive. But I want to know. And if I've learned anything in this life, if the tough stuff has taught me anything, it is that I can't know. And so I'm going to have to come to acceptance that I don't know. But someone else does know, even if it's unpleasant. Even if it's really confusing, there is a point behind all of it. It isn't all random and meaningless. We feel like we want to know because someone does know, because there's a reason that it all has to be. So can I suggest that sometimes there is a season in crises in our families, our homeschool families, where it's useful for us to send the kids to school. Okay, so I say this one with a grain of salt because I could have easily said this point a year ago, and I did, and I wrote it in my book, and it has a different feeling to it right now. It has a different experience, right? So going to school might not be your best choice right now. You figure that out for your own area. But I would have said one thing is that if you are challenged by depression and you're calling that unschooling, or if you are having some real overwhelming stuff go on and you don't know how to deal with it, and you know that you're not quite engaging your kids the way that they best need it, it's okay to take a break and to put them into school. You haven't failed them. You may want the best for them all the time, and guess what? Life happens, and sometimes we have to deal with stuff on life's terms. And so sometimes the best thing really is to take a break and put the kids back into school. So of course I'm saying that in a context, wasn't expecting to share that with you this year, like this year. So, and on that note, you don't have to send them to school. You could allow for a season of unschooling. A season of unschooling. Like, let this be some season where you learn that your kids are learning even when you're not enforcing learning opportunities the way that you may have at a certain point. Your kids are still learning. You will learn about your kids' learning. You will learn about their interests and their aptitudes. It'll actually be a really interesting and informative time. Learning from unschooling writers, learning from unschooling theory, even if you choose not to unschool later, it's okay. You learned a lot about your family and also about ultimately your purpose, your child's purpose for being here in the first place. So, of course, I'm going to say this point, to alter your expectations. I would like to say lower your expectations, but I'm not one of those people that wants to lower anything. I just want to keep on keeping on, which I think is the ultimate advice for all of us, no matter what. But we need to alter our expectations of how we do homeschool, maybe what our routine is like, what we're expecting of our kids, recognizing that we're not the only ones struggling with this crisis. They have emotions that are going around, and maybe they don't know how to share them with you, or maybe they don't know how to handle them. So that's infusing your homeschool. That's affecting your homeschool. And your well-being and your kids' well-being is the most important thing. It's more important than your routine. It's more important than the educational opportunities that you're trying to create for your kids. Which of course compels me to tell you that above all things, you have to take care of you. That's a hard one for me. Yes, it is. There's a reason I wrote the book. All of the things that I wrote in Homeschool Mama Self-Care, Nurturing the Nurturer, it's from experience, good old-fashioned experience, because I had to learn that stuff. Most of that stuff I really didn't know. I really didn't put into practice. You'd be surprised at some of the strategies, like say skincare, that I really only started when my oldest was 13. So that's 6 years ago, because I have 3 girls and 1 boy, and 3 of them, the girls are 19, 17, and 15 right now. And I have learned a lot about skincare routines, and also about veganism. A lot of skincare related knowledge is definitely garnered from my kids. So you'd be surprised at some of the strategies, that and so many more, that I've learned as a full-grown adult. Not something I learned right off the top. And it cannot be underlined enough that taking care of you is required if you are going to be taking care of someone else. And in this whole context, that taking care of you takes on a whole different, a lot more of a distilled picture. Everything you need even more. You need to address things head on. Do you need quiet time or time alone? Do you need to practice nourishing food strategies, things that actually, eating foods that actually is nourishing your brain, or consuming supplements that are beneficial for your brain, or making sure to burn off tension with exercise at least once a day? How about just doing something fun that's just for you, that maybe you want to pursue some sort of educational thing because it's something you want to do, to include that in your homeschool, or be outdoors on the regular because it's like nature therapy, right? Or real therapy. Real therapy is good too. Or just a hot bath and a glass of wine. Whatever it is, but take care of you. Be intentional with your self-care strategies. And as a reminder, because I like being reminded of this, and I think most people do, that remember that good times follow bad times. That good stuff happens post bad stuff, like COVID memes. So many amazing memes. There's something wildly surprising about this year, that there is so much humor, so much funny stuff coming on the internet that we get to enjoy. Hilarious stuff because of the challenges that we've faced. Communal merriment. I got an idea from a podcast, a homeschool podcast, a couple days ago, and I am going to use this for my birthday. I want to create a paper mache COVID virus and whack the heck out of it. That will be fun. I don't know what I'm going to put inside of it, because that means either the leftover Halloween candy or the upcoming Christmas candy, or if you have ideas, let me know down below. I'll keep you posted. Remember that this is hard. No, you already know. What I want to say is, I know that this is hard, but it's not forever. At least I don't think it's forever. I don't know. I don't know. Is it forever? Okay. So keep on keeping on. I'm with you. Let's turn this homeschool challenge into a charm. Okay, so Mother Teresa says, yeah, I know I'm Mother Teresa, but Mother Teresa, the Mother Teresa says, we can do no great things, only small things with great love. So let's keep on keeping on. Until next week, I wish you and your kids a charmed week.